The golden hour bathed the city in its soft light, a moment of stillness that felt almost foreign. I stood by the window, watching life unfold below, while my own had come to an unexpected halt. The trust that had once anchored me was now a distant memory, and I felt adrift, trying to find my bearings. The future I had imagined with Ashley no longer felt real, like a version of my life that had slipped away. In the silence, a new realization began to take shape. Without the weight of those illusions, I could confront the truth. Ashley, the person I thought I knew, had turned into someone unrecognizable. And with her absence, I was forced to ask myself, who am I without the life we built together? Revenge had never been part of my plan. What I needed now was clarity. As the truth came into focus, I found myself standing on unfamiliar ground. I could no longer trust anyone, not even myself. Yet, amidst the uncertainty, the only thing I could count on was my own resolve, the simple act of standing firm, no matter how fragile everything else seemed. Rebuilding was a slow and uncertain process. Every small step felt like progress, though the full picture was still out of reach. What I once thought was the end had turned into the beginning of something new, an uncertain path, but one that felt oddly peaceful in its ambiguity. I want to take a moment to thank you for joining me on this journey. Whether you're here because you've been through something similar, or you're just seeking a story that speaks to resilience, I truly appreciate your presence. Every story has its own weight, and the chance to share this one with you means more than words can convey. Now, the real work begins. This isn't just a story about betrayal, but about rebuilding and reimagining what comes after everything falls apart. It's about the tough, messy, and often lonely work of digging into the truth and finding the courage to start again. I invite you to dive deeper with me into the narrative, to reflect on what it means to rebuild from the wreckage. Leave your thoughts, your comments, and your insights along the way. Let's learn from each other, because this story isn't just mine, it's ours. So, let's begin. Together. Welcome to Evening Reads. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories. I hope you enjoy today's tale. Let's dive in. The soft glow of the desk lamp threw long shadows across Mark Ellison's cluttered workspace as he finished typing his report. A spring storm lashed at the windows of his high-rise office in downtown Chicago, each gust rattling the glass. 9:45 p.m. Again. For the fourth time this week, he sighed and rubbed his temples, eyes gritty with exhaustion. The quarterly review was nearly ready, just one more win for the company's star consultant. Mark had always lived by a hard rule, excellence or nothing. It had brought him success, until lately. Packing up, he called out to his colleague, Leo. "You're still here?" Mark slung his backpack over one shoulder and nodded. "Just wrapping up." "Another late one. Rachel must be a saint." "She gets it," Mark replied, his voice steady, though a flicker of doubt crossed his face. The drive back to their suburban townhouse was quiet, broken only by the slap of rain and the steady whir of tires. Mark's mind drifted to Rachel, how things had shifted. Little signs. A cooler tone. Smiles that seemed off. More yoga retreats and catch-ups with friends than before. Nothing definite. Just a nagging gut feeling. He noticed Rachel's car missing as he pulled into the driveway. House dark. Again. Inside, the silence felt heavy. He checked his phone. Nothing. In the fridge, a plate of stir-fry sat waiting, covered in cling film. A sticky note, "Out with Emma. Don't wait up. Love you." Mark microwaved the food and sat at the counter, thumbing through emails. His phone buzzed, a voicemail from Rachel. Relieved, he hit play, only to freeze. Mark sat still, his gaze unwavering as Rachel entered the room. She looked startled, her forced laugh falling flat. Mark's silence was thick with unspoken words, and he let it linger, watching her squirm under the weight of it. She hadn't realized yet how much he knew. "What's going on, Mark?" she asked nervously, her voice unsure. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he let her fidget, unsure of what to make of his stillness. His mind was sharp, calculating. This wasn't about confrontation, this was about control. She'd built her web of lies, and now it was unraveling. "I'm just thinking," Mark replied calmly, his voice distant. Rachel stepped closer, her voice softer now. "Are you okay?" Mark's eyes never left her. "I'm fine. Just thinking about everything." His words were deliberate, designed to let the tension rise, to make her wonder what he knew. Her eyes flickered with uncertainty, but Mark remained composed. She had no idea that everything she thought she was hiding had already been laid bare. "I'm going to need you to be honest with me," he added, his tone quiet but firm. The air between them grew heavier, and Mark knew it was time. He wasn't going to ask again. The truth would come out, on his terms. "About work?" He looked at her steadily. "About loyalty. What it really means." Something flashed across Rachel's face, unease, maybe guilt, but she masked it quickly with a yawn. Deep thoughts for a Sunday night. She stretched theatrically. "I'm wiped. Heading to bed. You coming?" "In a bit," Mark said evenly. She hesitated, then leaned down and kissed his forehead. "Don't stay up too late." After she disappeared upstairs, Mark sat back, listening to the rain drum steadily against the windows. The fracture in his world had widened to a canyon, but unlike most men, he wasn't about to rush headlong into it. No, he would build a bridge of facts, one careful step at a time. And when he crossed, it would be deliberate and final. A few days later, Mark found himself outside Hayes' design studio, tucked on a chic block in downtown Chicago. Not the flashiest gallery, but known for sharp, curated collections. He loitered outside, watching polished patrons filter in and out of that evening's exhibit. Through the large glass panes, he spotted her. Lila Hayes. Tall, elegant, her dark hair twisted into a sleek bun. 38, if his research was right, a few years older than Rachel but exuding a different energy, crisp, composed. Mark straightened his jacket and stepped inside, accepting a glass of wine from a tray as he moved through the space. The artwork struck him, bold, visceral, filled with fractured lines and turbulent emotion. "First time visiting us?" Mark turned to see Lila beside him, a polished smile in place. Up close, her eyes were sharp, watchful. "Yes," he said, meeting her gaze. "The collection's striking." "Thank you. This exhibit is about transformation through upheaval." She gestured toward a canvas, delicate blues and greens slashed by violent streaks of red. "Fitting," Mark replied. "Sometimes fractures are necessary." Something in his tone made her study him more closely. "Are you a collector, Mr. Ellison?" Mark replied smoothly. "Not a collector. Just someone interested in the truth." She tilted her head, intrigued. "Lila Hayes." He shook her hand, noting the firmness of her grip and the subtle flicker of curiosity in her eyes. "This is my gallery. Pleasure to meet you," Lila said smoothly. Mark shook her hand, noting the firm grip. "Your husband must be proud of what you've built here." A flicker, quick, subtle, crossed her face. "Ethan supports me, in his own way." She glanced around the bustling room. "Are you here alone, Mr. Ellison?" "Mark, please." "And yes. My wife had other plans tonight." "As did my husband," Lila replied, her smile tightening. "Personal training sessions run late sometimes." The unspoken weight of those words lingered between them, unacknowledged but crystal clear. Mark wandered toward a smaller canvas tucked in a quiet corner, two abstract figures, intertwined yet pulling apart, connected only by a single crimson thread. "This one's powerful." Lila stepped beside him. "The artist calls it Betrayal's Thread." Evocative title. "Betrayal leaves marks that never quite heal," she said softly. "It rewrites your life, without permission." Mark turned, meeting her gaze fully. Some stories are meant to be rewritten. Their eyes locked, a quiet, loaded moment of mutual understanding. No names. No accusations. Just the shared burn of recognition. "Would you like to hear more about the artist's process?" Lila asked, her polished tone slipping easily back into place as other patrons passed nearby. Very much, Mark nodded. I find the process reveals as much as the result. They moved slowly through the gallery, discussing brushstrokes and themes, but beneath the art talk, their words danced carefully around loyalty, betrayal, and the quiet strategies of those left behind. By the time Mark stepped out into the crisp night air an hour later, nothing direct had been said. But everything had been understood. He glanced back once. Lila stood by the window, watching him go. He gave a slight nod, part acknowledgement, part promise. She returned it before turning back to her guests. It wasn't romantic. It was tactical. A shared understanding. A beginning. Driving home, Mark felt the weight of his wedding band, cold, deliberate. For the first time in weeks, the path forward sharpened into focus. 2 days later, Mark arrived at a tucked-away coffee shop between a bookstore and a vintage boutique, far enough from familiar ground to ensure privacy. He chose a corner seat with a full view of the entrance, ordered black coffee, and waited. Lila Hayes walked in precisely on time, dressed in a sleek black turtleneck and tailored pants, calm, precise, and ready. She spotted him immediately, eyes scanning the cafe before walking over, composed and calm. Thanks for meeting me, Mark said, standing as Lila approached. She slid gracefully into the seat across from him. Your message was intriguing. Mutual interests to discuss. Nicely vague. A server appeared, and Lila ordered an Americano. Once they were alone again, she leaned in slightly, her voice low. Let's skip pleasantries, Mr. Ellison. Why are we here? Mark met her gaze squarely. I believe our spouses are having an affair. Lila didn't flinch, no gasp, no dramatics. Only a subtle tightening at the corners of her eyes. What proof do you have? Mark unlocked his phone and pulled up a document, sliding it across the table. Text records between Rachel's phone and a number linked to Ethan. Dates, locations. Plus, a voicemail, meant for him, but sent to me by mistake. Lila scanned the screen, her expression unreadable. Only the slight whitening of her knuckles around her coffee cup betrayed anything. How long have you known? She asked quietly. Confirmed? About 2 weeks, Mark replied. Suspected for longer. He watched her closely. And you? Lila gave a dry, humorless laugh. Women usually know first. But proof? That's harder. I've seen hotel charges. Gaps in his schedule. All the clichés. Yet you haven't confronted him. She shrugged. For what? Denials. Tears. Promises. The same tired script. Her eyes narrowed. But I doubt you brought me here just to swap war stories. Mark nodded, impressed by her clarity. I want to propose an alliance. Not to patch up broken marriages, that ship has sailed. But something more, constructive. Lila raised a brow. Revenge? Justice, Mark corrected, voice cool. On our terms. Public. Irrefutable. Their coffees arrived. Lila stirred hers slowly, eyes thoughtful. What exactly are you thinking? Making a scene? Not my style, Mark said evenly. I'm thinking of something much more precise. He leaned forward, eyes sharp. They think they're clever, Mark said quietly, fingers circling his coffee mug. Hiding in plain sight. What if we use that against them? Lila's eyes sharpened, curiosity unmistakable. I'm listening. I've been tracking patterns. Rachel meets Ethan most Friday nights, always under the guise of business dinners. Different spots around town. I'm fairly confident I can predict where they'll be next. And then what? Lila asked, arching a brow. We just show up and toss drinks in their faces? She gave a dry laugh. Hardly subtle. Nothing that crude, Mark replied, voice even. We make a reservation at the same restaurant. Let them see us together. Let them stew. Wonder. And then, when the timing is right, we reveal everything. Calmly. Publicly. Lila's expression turned thoughtful. More than just the text records you showed me? Much more, Mark confirmed. Financials. Photos from their private booth at Shoreline Bistro. I've been thorough. Lila sat back, weighing his words. Why public? Why not deal with this quietly? Mark's jaw tensed slightly. Because they've humiliated us in secret for months. Some betrayals deserve an audience. She studied him carefully. You're not quite what I expected, Mark Ellison. Very controlled. I value order, Mark said simply. And consequences. Her eyes narrowed just a touch. This isn't just about exposing them, is it? You want something more. Mark's gaze hardened. I want them to lose what they thought was untouchable: security, status, comfort. Lila took a slow sip, clearly calculating. If we do this, and I'm not committing yet, we need ground rules. No messy confrontations. No theatrics that make us look unstable. Agreed, Mark nodded. This is precision, not drama. And afterward, she asked quietly. What's your endgame? Mark hesitated, then said, for me, divorce. I've already consulted my lawyer. Lila gave a slow nod. I'll need to see all your evidence. Every piece. If I'm risking my name, I want certainty. Mark slid a sleek USB drive across the table. Everything's here. Take your time. She pocketed it smoothly. I'll call you tomorrow with my decision. They finished their coffee and waited silence, an uneasy alliance forming in the space between them. Two strangers, united by shared betrayal. As they stood to leave, Lila hesitated for a moment. Why did you come to me? She asked, her gaze sharp. You could have handled this alone. Mark answered honestly. 2 reasons. First, you deserve the truth. Second, justice hits harder when there's someone beside you who understands why it's necessary. Lila considered that, then extended her hand. Tomorrow, then. Mark shook it firmly. Tomorrow. As they stepped out into the cool evening, nothing about their parting hinted at the gravity of their meeting. To passers-by, it looked like 2 professionals wrapping up a business deal. Composed. Unremarkable. But beneath the calm, a storm was tightening its grip. And soon, it would break. That afternoon, Mark sat at his desk, phone pressed to his ear, listening to Rachel's voicemail greeting for the 3rd time. He ended the call without leaving a message and glanced at the clock. 2:17 p.m. on a Tuesday. She was supposed to be in meetings. His email pinged, Lila Hayes. Evidence reviewed. We need to talk. Are you available this evening? Mark typed a quick yes, named the time, then turned back to his planning. He'd tracked Rachel patterns for weeks and narrowed down their usual Friday night haunts. 3 upscale restaurants downtown fit their MO. Now he needed to confirm. His phone buzzed. Will Jensen. Drinks tonight? Can't tonight. Tomorrow? Sure. Everything okay? Getting there, Mark replied, keeping it brief. He checked his notes and dialed the first restaurant on his list. Lakeshore Grill, how may I assist you? Hi, just confirming a reservation for Friday. Name's Ellison, or possibly Hayes. A pause. I'm sorry, no reservation under either name. Thanks. He hung up and tried the second, same result. 3rd call, Riviera, good afternoon. Hi, confirming a reservation for Friday. Ellison or Hayes? A brief pause, then, yes, Mr. Hayes, 2 guests at 8 p.m., window seat, as requested. Perfect. Thanks for confirming. Mark ended the call, cold clarity settling over him. Target confirmed. Next came venue preparation. Mark pulled up the contact info for Lydia Carver, owner of Riviera. 2 years back, he'd helped her navigate a brutal software breach that threatened to sink her business. She'd promised him a favor anytime. That time had come. He dialed her direct line, one few people had. "Mark Ellison." Lydia answered warmly. "It's been a while. What can I do for you?" "Hi, Lydia. I'm calling to redeem that favor you once offered." A pause. "I'm listening. I need a reservation for 2 this Friday. 8 p.m. in a specific table. The place is fully booked Friday, but for you? I'll make it happen." "Which table?" "Window side, adjacent to the table booked under Hayes." Lydia's tone shifted, more serious now. "That sounds delicate." "It is," Mark said evenly. "It's a personal matter I need to handle. Quietly, but publicly. Do I need to worry about any drama at my restaurant?" "No scenes. No shouting. Just a necessary conversation," Mark promised. "I give you my word, it'll stay civil." Lydia exhaled. "You helped save my business, Mark." Reservations confirmed, 7:45 p.m. "I'll oversee seating myself." "Thank you. One more thing, I might need a small assist from your team when the moment comes." "Tell me." Mark laid out his request. When he finished, Lydia was quiet for a beat. "That's an unusual ask. But doable." "Good reason?" "The best," Mark assured her. "Then it's done. I'll text you the confirmation." Mark ended the call and leaned back, feeling the plan click into place. The battlefield was set. Now it was time to finalize strategy with his unexpected ally. That evening, Mark met Lila at a quiet Italian bistro tucked away from their usual circles. They chose a secluded corner booth, keeping their voices low despite the privacy. "The evidence is airtight," Lila said, sliding a folder across the table. "I'm in." Mark nodded. "I've confirmed, they're booked at Riviera this Friday. 8 p.m. We'll be seated right next to them." Lila's eyes gleamed, a flash of admiration. "You've been busy." "And after we're seated?" Lila asked, eyes sharp. "We act normal," Mark replied. "Two friends or colleagues having dinner. We let them see us. Let them feel that unease. They might leave." "They won't," Mark said with quiet certainty. "Rachel hates public scenes more than anything. She'll pretend everything's fine. Ethan will follow her lead." Lila tapped her finger against her wine glass thoughtfully. "And then?" Mark outlined the rest of the plan, deliberate, step by step. He watched Lila's expression shift from worry to something like reluctant admiration. "That's ruthlessly elegant," she admitted when he finished. "But it relies on perfect timing." "Exactly. Which is why I need full commitment. Once we start, there's no turning back." Lila took a slow sip of her wine, studying him. "You're not what I expected. No anger. No drama." "Anger's messy," Mark said simply. "Precision wins." Lila lifted her glass. "To precision." Mark clinked hers. "And to justice." They finished their meal, ironing out final details. Finally, Lila asked the question he'd been waiting for. "Do you think they actually love each other?" Mark paused. "Does it matter?" "I suppose not," she murmured. "But I do wonder what stories they tell themselves to justify it." "People are good at rewriting reality when it suits them," Mark said flatly. "Our job is to tear those illusions apart." Lila nodded, new resolve flickering in her eyes. "Friday, then. I should mention, I'll be bringing something extra to the table." Mark raised an eyebrow. "Oh? You're not the only one gathering dirt." A sly smile crossed her face. "Ethan been sloppy elsewhere too." "Care to elaborate?" "Let's keep a little mystery for Friday." Lila slid out of the booth. 7:30 at Riviera. "We're something they won't forget." Mark watched her leave, a flicker of respect blooming. She was sharper, more focused than he'd expected, driven by the same cold clarity. The battlefield was set. The allies ready. Now, they waited. Later that night, Mark's younger brother, Eric, stood in his home office, leaning against the bookshelf. At 36, Eric shared Mark's build, but where Mark radiated quiet control, Eric carried a relaxed charm that belied sharp instincts. "You're sure about this?" Eric asked, holding up a tiny microphone. "Feels like overkill," Eric muttered, turning the tiny mic over in his hand. "It's insurance," Mark replied, flipping through documents on his desk. "Everything has to be documented." Eric shook his head, watching him work. Bringing Lila Hayes into this, staging this whole dinner setup. Why not just confront Rachel head-on? Or file for divorce and move on? Mark looked up, meeting his brother's concerned gaze. "This isn't just about ending a marriage. It's about truth. And consequences." "Sounds like revenge." "Justice," Mark corrected smoothly. "Rachel and Ethan didn't just cheat. They built a whole network of lies. Manipulated everyone around them. That has to mean something." Eric sighed, seeing the iron resolve in Mark's eyes. "You know I've got your back. Always." He held up the mic. "So where does this go?" "Inside jacket pocket. Links straight to my phone, records everything." Eric's brow furrowed. "Isn't recording people without consent illegal here?" Mark gave a tight smile. "Not in public spaces where there's no reasonable expectation of privacy." "I checked." Eric nodded, reluctantly impressed. "Always thorough." "It matters," Mark said quietly, sliding a few key documents into a slim folder. "This has to be airtight." The doorbell rang, breaking the tension. Mark checked his watch. "That'll be Emma." Eric raised an eyebrow. "Rachel friend?" "Complicated move." "She's on the fence," Mark said. "I need to know where she stands before Friday." He opened the door to find Emma waiting, visibly tense. Her eyes widened when she spotted Eric as they stepped inside. "I didn't know anyone else would be here," she said quickly, clutching her purse tighter. "My brother's helping with something," Mark explained. "He'll step out in a minute." Eric grabbed his coffee mug. "I'll be in the kitchen." "Want one, Emma?" "No thanks," she said stiffly. Once they were alone, Mark gestured to the couch. Emma sat on the edge, shoulders taut. "Rachel knows we talked," she blurted. "She confronted me yesterday." Mark's face stayed calm. "And what did you tell her?" "That you were asking questions, but I didn't give specifics." Her eyes were pleading. "Mark, I'm really stuck in the middle here." "Rachel been my friend for years," Emma said, her voice tight, twisting her hands in her lap. "But what she's doing, it's wrong. I don't know what to do." "You pick a side," Mark replied, his tone gentle but unwavering. "Not mine. Not hers. Truth or deception." Emma shook her head. "It's not that simple." "It is." Mark leaned in, eyes steady. "Emma, I'm not asking you to betray Rachel. She's already betrayed both of us. I'm asking you to stand for what's right. By helping you humiliate her in public?" Emma's voice wavered. "She told me about Friday night. That she somehow saw your name on the reservation list." Mark's eyes narrowed slightly. "So Rachel knew he'd be at Riviera. Interesting. What else did she say?" Emma hesitated, then sighed. "She said, you wouldn't understand. That things between you have been dead for a long time." She looked down, voice softer. "That Ethan makes her feel alive again." Mark took that in without flinching, though her words cut deep. His jaw tightened. "And you think that justifies months of deceit?" "No," Emma whispered. "But Mark, this plan of yours, it feels so cold." "As opposed to what they did," Mark replied, a sharpness creeping into his tone, which was, compassionate. Emma flinched, and Mark caught himself, exhaling slowly. His voice softened. "I'm not asking you to participate. Just, understand why this needs to happen. What do you need from me?" "Neutrality. If Rachel asks about my plans, you know nothing. Emma nodded slowly. I can do that. She hesitated, eyes glossy. For what it's worth, I never approved of this. Never. Yet you kept her secret. I thought it would burn out. That she'd stop. Emma's eyes shimmered. She's making a huge mistake, Mark. You're a good man. Mark stood, signaling the conversation's end. Friday changes everything, Emma. Be ready. After she left, Eric reappeared from the kitchen. Sounded heavy. Rachel knows I'll be at Riviera, Mark said, brow furrowing. She's suspicious. Does that change the plan? Mark shook his head slowly. No. If anything, it adds tension. Could work in our favor. Eric smirked. You're scary sometimes, you know that? So cold and calculated. Mark's eyes were steady. Not cold. Controlled, Mark corrected. There's a difference. Eric nodded, conceding the point. Need me there Friday? Back up, Mark said. No. This has to be just Lila and me. Clean. Precise. Eric stepped forward and placed the tiny microphone on the desk. All set. Battery lasts 6 hours. He gripped Mark's shoulder, his tone firm. Whatever happens, you've got family who has your back. After Eric left, Mark remained in his office, reviewing every detail of the plan. The pieces were in motion. Rachel knew he would be at Riviera, but she didn't know why. She'd be on edge, perhaps even ready to confront him. Perfect. Let her believe she had the upper hand, the psychological advantage of control before the truth shattered everything. Mark checked his phone. There was a text from Lila. Final preparations complete. Are you ready? He typed back, absolutely. 2 more days. No satisfaction. No relief. Just the calm certainty of a man who had found his way through the wreckage of betrayal. Not with rage, but with precision. Friday evening arrived with unusual clarity for Portland in spring. The sunset bathed the city in amber and gold as Mark stood before his closet, selecting his armor for the night. A charcoal suit, Ashley's favorite, paired with a deep blue tie. Not for her benefit, but for the statement it made. Unbowed. Unbroken. His wedding ring remained on his finger one last time, not as a symbol of love, but of promises shattered. His phone buzzed. A text from Lila. In position. She's wearing red. He looks nervous. They had arrived early. Mark checked his watch. 7:30, right on schedule. He drove downtown with mechanical precision, parking near Riviera. The walk to the restaurant gave him time to center himself, review the plan once more. In his jacket pocket, the microphone pressed against his chest. The folder in his inner pocket contained everything needed to unravel the lies. Lila met him at the entrance, her smile warm with genuine concern. Everything is arranged as requested, she said quietly, leading him inside. The special dessert is prepared. Thank you, Lila. I appreciate your discretion. She nodded, guiding him to table 7, as promised. Your companion has already arrived. The hostess led Mark to the table, where Lila Hayes sat, striking in a black dress that exuded an air of funeral elegance. Her dark hair cascaded in soft waves around her shoulders, and her makeup was flawless, armor of a different kind. She rose slightly as Mark approached, her expression calm and composed, betraying none of the tension that the evening would bring. Right on time, she murmured as Mark took his seat. Mark surveyed the room, casually scanning. He quickly found Rachel and Ethan at the window table. Rachel wore a fitted red dress he hadn't seen before, her blonde hair swept up to reveal the nape of her neck. Ethan leaned toward her, whispering something that made her laugh, once a sound that meant everything to Mark but now rang hollow. Rachel hadn't noticed him yet. Good. They look comfortable, Lila observed, her voice neutral. Practiced, Mark replied. They won't be for long. He opened his menu, deliberately taking his time. Shall we begin? They ordered wine and appetizers, maintaining the appearance of a casual dinner. Their conversation remained deliberately professional, two colleagues discussing business, careful not to raise any suspicion if overheard. When their wine arrived, Lila raised her glass. "To clarity," she said, her voice carrying across the table. "In consequences," Mark added, clinking his glass against hers. The sound was enough to catch Rachel's attention. Her head turned, eyes widening when they locked with Mark's. The color drained from her face before flushing quickly with either alarm or anger, or perhaps both. Ethan followed her gaze, his reaction more controlled but equally telling, a slight stiffening of his shoulders. A forced smile as he turned back to Rachel, speaking in low tones. "They've seen us," Lila noted dryly. "She looks rattled." "She'll recover," Mark predicted. "She always does." Sure enough, Rachel quickly composed herself, leaning back in her chair with deliberate casualness. She whispered something to Ethan, then, to Mark's surprise, raised her glass in their direction before taking a sip. "Impressive recovery," Lila said with a hint of approval, though a bit desperate. Their appetizers arrived, slowing the momentum of the plan. Rachel and Ethan maintained their facade of a romantic dinner, but their movements were stiff, forced. Twice, Rachel checked her phone, perhaps texting for advice or support. Ethan drank his wine too quickly, signaling for another glass. "She's getting bolder," Lila noted, watching Rachel laugh grow deliberately louder. "Making a point." "Desperation," Mark replied, unmoved. "She thinks if she acts unconcerned, we'll back down." "She doesn't know you very well, does she?" Lila's question hung between them as they continued their meal. Mark found himself studying Lila with a new appreciation. Her composure, her clarity of purpose, it matched his own. In another life, under different circumstances, they might have been allies. "It's time," Mark said, checking his watch. "Are you ready?" Lila drew a deep breath, the first sign of vulnerability. "Yes." Mark made eye contact with Lydia across the room, giving a small nod. She returned the gesture before disappearing into the kitchen. Rachel leaned toward Ethan, their fingers intertwined on the tablecloth. The intimacy of it hit Mark like a physical blow, not from pain, but from the sheer audacity. She knew he was watching. This was deliberate. Lila's voice hardened. "Now." Mark stood, followed by Lila. They moved toward the window table with unhurried confidence. Rachel saw them coming, her smile freezing in place. Ethan began to rise, but Mark gestured for him to stay seated. "Rachel," Mark said coolly. "Ethan, mind if we join you?" Without waiting for an answer, Mark pulled out a chair from a nearby empty table and sat. Lila did the same. "Rachel, what are you doing?" Rachel hissed, her composure cracking. "This is inappropriate." "Inappropriate?" Mark raised an eyebrow. Interesting choice of words. Ethan cleared his throat. "Look, man, I think." "I'm not interested in what you think, Ethan," Mark cut him off smoothly. "Or what you feel, or the justifications you've created to explain your actions." Lila turned to Ethan, her voice even. "Did you enjoy the hotel last weekend? The one charged to our joint account?" Ethan's expression hardened. "Lila, this isn't the place." "Where's the place, Ethan?" Lila asked. "Our home? Were you promised fidelity? The marriage counselor's office you refused to visit?" Rachel's face drained of color. "Mark, please. People are staring." "Yes, they are," Mark acknowledged. "Witnesses to this moment. Appropriate, don't you think?" At that moment, Lydia approached their table, carrying a silver-covered dish. "Your special dessert, as requested," she said, placing it ceremoniously in the center of the table. "We didn't order dessert," Ethan said, confusion briefly overriding his discomfort. "Compliments of your hosts," Lydia replied, gesturing to Mark and Lila before stepping back. Mark reached forward, removing the silver cover. Instead of dessert, the platter held an arrangement of printed photographs, hotel receipts, and text message transcripts. In the center, a card bore a handwritten message. to loyalty, now a thing of the past. Rachel gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Ethan's face darkened as he recognized the evidence of their affair laid out for all to see. "What the hell is this?" Ethan demanded, his voice rising despite the public setting. "Evidence," Mark replied simply, "of months of deception, of calculated betrayal." He turned to Rachel, his voice cold. "And the death of whatever we once had." "Rachel, please," she pleaded, tears welling in her eyes. "We could talk about this privately." "This is cruel," Lila interjected. "Was it kind to lie to our faces?" Mark's voice was calm, but firm. "To steal our time, our trust, our dignity?" The restaurant had grown quiet, other diners now openly watching the drama unfold. Mark felt no satisfaction, only the cold certainty that justice was being served. "I've filed for divorce," he told Rachel calmly. "The papers will be delivered Monday. I've documented everything, the affair, the lies, the timeline. Fighting it would be futile." Rachel, tears spilled over. "Mark, please. This isn't you. You don't do things this way." "You don't know me anymore," Mark replied. "Perhaps you never did." Ethan, recovering from his initial shock, leaned forward aggressively. "You've made your point. Now, leave us alone." "Actually," Lila said, pulling a folder from her purse, "we're not quite finished." She removed several documents, sliding them toward Ethan. "Financial records from the gym. Client accounts you've been skimming from for months. Quite systematically, I must say." The color drained from Ethan's face. "That's a lie." "The investigators didn't think so," Lila replied. "Nor did the police, when I filed the report this morning." Rachel stared at Ethan in shock. "What is she talking about?" Ethan grabbed Rachel's wrist. "Don't listen to her. She's making this up." Mark's voice cut through the tension. "She's not. And you knew, Rachel." "The transfers to your private account show you knew," Mark said calmly. Rachel's expression confirmed it before her words could deny it: guilt, panic, the realization that she was implicated in something far worse than an affair. "I didn't," she started. "Save it for the authorities," Lila interrupted. "The evidence has already been submitted to them." Ethan stood abruptly, towering over the table. "You fucking bitch," he snarled at Lila. "You had no right." "Sit down, Mr. Hayes," Lydia's voice rang out from behind him, where she stood with the restaurant's security guard. "Or you'll be escorted out. Immediately." The threat of further public humiliation forced Ethan back into his seat, though rage continued to radiate from him. Mark stood, buttoning his jacket slowly. "We're finished here," he announced. Lila rose beside him, her posture just as dignified. "Enjoy explaining the embezzlement charges," Lila said, her voice cold. "I hear the gym's owner is particularly upset." As they turned to leave, Rachel reached for Mark's arm. "Mark, wait. You can't just..." He looked down at her hand, then into her eyes. "Goodbye, Rachel." The finality in his voice made her recoil, as if struck. Mark and Lila walked away together, leaving chaos in their wake. Behind them, they could hear Rachel muffled sobs and Ethan angry muttering as they tried to process what had just unfolded. At the restaurant entrance, Lydia approached them one last time. "Was it what you needed?" she asked Mark quietly. "It was necessary," he replied. "Thank you for your help." Outside, in the cool evening air, Mark and Lila stood silently for a moment, the adrenaline of the confrontation beginning to ebb. "Are you all right?" Mark asked, his voice soft. Lila nodded, a strange smile playing at her lips. "Better than I expected." "You?" "The same." He offered his hand. "Thank you for your partnership in this." She shook it firmly. "We make a formidable team, Mark Ellison." "Though we do, Lila Hayes," he replied, before they parted ways without another word. The night air felt somehow cleaner, as if the truth had cleared away some invisible pollution. Mark walked to his car, the weight of his wedding ring noticeable for the first time in years. Tomorrow, he would remove it. Tonight, it remained, a reminder of what had been lost and what had been gained in its place: clarity, truth, freedom. Emma, perhaps, or more likely Ethan, though that relationship now seemed doomed by circumstances far beyond the affair itself. She called repeatedly on Saturday morning. Mark let the calls go to voicemail, listening to her increasingly desperate messages with detached calm. "Mark, please. We need to talk. This isn't fair. You blindsided me. The thing with Ethan finances, I didn't know the extent of it. You have to believe me." And finally, by Sunday, the police called him in for questioning. "Mark, please. I need your help." He deleted each message after listening, jotting down notes for his lawyer, but feeling nothing beyond a distant pity for the woman he'd once trusted completely. Monday morning brought a call from Lila. "Have you seen the news?" Mark hadn't. At her suggestion, he checked the local news website, finding a small but pointed story: local fitness trainer arrested on embezzlement charges. The article mentioned Ethan by name, noting that client funds had been systematically diverted over a period of 18 months. There was no mention of Rachel yet, but that would likely change as the investigation unfolded. "How are you holding up?" Lila asked. "Focused," Mark replied truthfully. "The divorce papers are being delivered today." "And you?" "Relieved. Strangely enough. It's over. No more pretending." They briefly discussed practical matters: changing locks, separating accounts, the mechanics of dismantling shared lives. There was comfort in these mundane details, a structured process to end what had once seemed permanent. After the call, Mark went to work as usual, ignoring the curious glances from colleagues who'd heard rumors about Friday night. The structured environment of the office provided some semblance of normalcy amidst the chaos. By mid-afternoon, his phone rang, Rachel, calling from an unfamiliar number. After a moment's consideration, he answered. "Mark," her voice was raw, as if she'd been crying for hours. "They served me the papers." "At work?" "In front of everyone." "Standard procedure," he replied evenly. "It was humiliating." A bitter laugh. "Though I suppose that was the point." Mark closed his office door for privacy. "What do you want, Rachel?" "A chance to explain. To apologize." "Neither is necessary." "Damn it, Mark," she snapped, her composure finally shattering. 8 years of marriage. And you can just shut down like this? Like I never mattered?" The accusation stirred something in him, not guilt, but a flash of genuine anger that he allowed himself to express. "You made your choices, Rachel. 4 months. Deliberate, calculated choices to betray everything we built." "I made mistakes," she whispered, the words weak, rehearsed. No, Mark cut her off. "Mistakes are accidental. You lied to my face daily. You created elaborate cover stories. You knew what Ethan was doing with those funds, and you said nothing. Those aren't mistakes. They're character." Silence stretched between them, broken only by her uneven breathing. "The police think I was involved in Ethan embezzlement," she said finally. "Were you?" Another long pause. "Not directly. I knew he was doing something with client accounts," she admitted. "But I told myself it wasn't my business. And the money he transferred to your private account, he said it was his commission. Bonus money." Her voice shrank. "I wanted to believe him." Mark closed his eyes, momentarily exhausted by the layers of deception. "Talk to a lawyer, Rachel. I can't help you with this." "Can't or won't?" The question held no accusation, only sad recognition. "Both," Mark admitted. "Goodbye, Rachel." He ended the call and turned back to his computer screen. The code made sense in ways people never would: clean, logical, predictable. No hidden agendas, no betrayals. Just cause and effect, action and consequence. That evening, Mark met Will and Eric at a quiet bar downtown, their first gathering since the explosive dinner at Riviera. Will arrived first, greeting Mark with a quick hug that said more than words could. Heard it got intense, Will said, taking his seat. That's one word for it, Mark replied. Mark ordered scotch, neat. Naomi's devastated, Will said. Rachel been staying with her. I assumed as much. She told Naomi everything. About Ethan, the money, all of it. Will shook his head. Rachel says she's going to cooperate with the investigation, turn witness against Ethan. Mark nodded, unsurprised. Self-preservation had always been Rachel's strength. Eric arrived, clapping Mark on the shoulder before sitting. The man of the hour? Hardly, Mark replied. Are you kidding? Eric grinned. You're practically a legend at the gym. The guy who took down the crooked trainer and his accomplice in one move. I didn't do it for the attention. No, Eric agreed, his expression sobering. You did it because it was necessary. The three men drank in companionable silence for a moment, the background noise of the bar washing over them. What's next? Will finally asked. After the divorce is final? Mark considered the question. Work? Travel, maybe? I haven't thought much beyond getting through this part. You should take some time off, Eric suggested. Clear your head. Maybe. The conversation drifted to safer topics, sports, Eric's new motorcycle, Will's promotion. Normal life, continuing despite the seismic shifts in Mark's personal landscape. As the evening wound down, Will pulled Mark aside while Eric settled the tab. You doing okay? Really? Mark nodded slowly. I'm better than I expected to be. Emptier in some ways, more solid in others. You handled it like you handle everything, Will observed. Methodically. It was the only way I knew how. Will studied his friend. Just don't let this turn you cold, man. Not everyone betrays the people they love. Mark managed a small smile. I know. You and Naomi are proof of that. Speaking of Naomi, Will hesitated. She wants you to know she's sorry for not telling you sooner. Tell her I understand. Loyalty is complicated. As they prepared to leave, Mark's phone buzzed with a text from Lila Hayes. Ethan may bail. Moving in with his brother temporarily. Thought you should know. Mark showed the message to Eric and Will. You think he's a threat? Eric asked, instantly protective. No, Mark replied confidently. He's a narcissist, not a fighter. He'll focus on saving himself. Outside the bar, the three men parted ways with promises to meet again soon. Mark drove home to his empty house. Noticing for the first time that Rachel had returned while he was out and taken some of her clothes, a cosmetics bag missing from the bathroom. Her favorite books were gone from the shelf. The dismantling had begun in earnest. Mark moved through the house, opening windows to let in the cool night air, as if trying to clear the space of lingering deception. In the bedroom, he finally removed his wedding ring. Mark placed his wedding ring in a drawer where he wouldn't have to see it. It wasn't a symbolic gesture of closure, Mark didn't believe in such things, but a practical acknowledgement of changed circumstances. The ring no longer represented anything real as he prepared for bed. His phone buzzed again. Another text from Lila. Thank you for everything. It's strange, but I feel more myself than I have in years, she added. Mark understood exactly what she meant. Likewise, he replied. Strange days ahead, but honest ones, came her response. Finally, Mark put down his phone and turned off the light, lying in the darkness that felt cleaner somehow than before. The storm had broken. The damage was done. What remained was rebuilding on foundations of truth this time. A week after the confrontation at Riviera, Mark sat in his attorney's office, reviewing the proposed divorce settlement. Lila's attorney, Rebecca Chun, a sharp-featured woman with 20 years of experience handling high-conflict divorces, walked him through the details with clinical precision. Given the circumstances and the evidence you've provided, Rebecca explained, Ms. Ellison has limited grounds to contest anything. Her attorney was pushing for a better division of assets, but they were holding firm. Mark nodded, scanning the documents. In my conditions, Non-negotiable as requested. She retains her personal accounts, minus any funds demonstrably connected to Mr. Hayes's activities. She forfeits claim to the house, your retirement accounts, and stock options. She gets her car, personal items, and the accounts in her name that aren't implicated in the investigation. What's her position on the timeline? Rebecca allowed herself a small smile. She wants this over quickly, especially with the ongoing criminal investigation. She's agreed to the expedited process. Good. Mark signed the papers Rebecca indicated, each signature another step toward resolution. As they concluded their meeting, Rebecca hesitated. Mr. Ellison, I've handled hundreds of divorces. Most clients in your position would be angry, vindictive. You're remarkably contained. Anger clouds judgment, Mark replied simply. I prefer clarity. Well, your clarity has positioned you advantageously. I'll file these today. Mark thanked her and left, checking his phone to find a voicemail from an unfamiliar number. Detective Marcus Rivera, Portland Police Department, requesting a meeting. Interesting, Mark thought. He had provided information about Ethan embezzlement anonymously through an encrypted email account. He hadn't expected direct police contact. Mark returned the call immediately. Detective Rivera answered on the second ring. Mr. Ellison, thank you for getting back to me. Could you come to the station this afternoon? There have been developments in the Hayes case you should be aware of. I'm available at 3. Mark confirmed, curiosity piqued. The police station was busier than Mark had expected, officers and civilians moving through the lobby with purpose. Detective Rivera met him personally, a compact man with salt and pepper hair and sharp, assessing eyes that missed nothing. Appreciate you coming in, Rivera said, leading Mark to a small but private conference room instead of an interrogation space. Coffee? No, thank you. Mark took the offered seat, maintaining his usual composed exterior despite his growing curiosity. You mentioned developments? Rivera nodded, opening a folder on the table between them. Let me be direct, Mr. Ellison. We know you were the anonymous source who provided the initial evidence against Ethan Hayes. Mark didn't deny it. How? The manner of delivery was anonymous, but the information itself could only have come from someone with specific knowledge of both the personal and financial situations involved. Rivera studied Mark's face. Your divorce filing against your wife the same day we received the evidence was suggestive. I see. Am I in some kind of trouble, detective? Not at all. In fact, you've helped break open a case significantly larger than we initially understood. Rivera pushed several photographs across the table, surveillance images of Ethan meeting with men Mark didn't recognize. Hayes's embezzlement was just the surface. He was moving money for these gentlemen, using the gym as a laundering operation. Mark examined the photos with genuine surprise. I had no idea. Few did. But once we started pulling threads, Rivera shrugged. Your wife claims she knew only about the client account skimming, not the larger operation. And do you believe her? We're still determining the extent of her involvement. Rivera's expression revealed nothing. She's cooperating, providing information about Hayes's contacts, schedules, behaviors. Self-preservation. Mark nodded, not bothering to hide his assessment. She's facing potential charges of accessory after the fact. Possibly financial fraud. Less serious than Hayes's charges, but still significant. Mark absorbed this information, connecting it to Rachel's increasingly desperate attempts to contact him over the past week. Now her motivation was clear, she needed his help, or at least his sympathy, as her legal situation deteriorated. What exactly do you need from me, detective? Context, Rivera replied. Background on when your wife's behavior changed, when money patterns shifted, when new acquaintances entered the picture. Anything that might help establish a timeline. Mark provided what information he could, dates, observations, patterns he'd noticed without fully understanding their significance. Rivera took careful notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. You're very observant, Mr. Ellison, the detective commented as their meeting concluded. Most people miss these details. I pay attention to patterns, Mark said simply. When they change, I notice. As Mark prepared to leave, Rivera had one final question. You didn't seem surprised about your wife's involvement with Hayes's activities. Did you suspect the financial aspect of their relationship? Mark considered this carefully. I suspected she knew more than she claimed. The extent of it, that was unexpected. Outside the police station, Mark sat in his car for several minutes, processing this new information. The affair had been painful enough, a betrayal of trust and vows. But this. Ashley's willingness to overlook or even participate in financial crimes revealed a stranger he'd never truly known, despite 8 years of marriage. His phone rang. It was Lila Hayes. The police contacted me, she said without preamble. Did they reach out to you too? Just left the station, Mark confirmed. Money laundering, apparently. Lila's bitter laugh carried through the phone. Of course, Ethan always needed more money, more admiration, more everything. Legal means were too limiting. Did you suspect? Mark asked. Not money laundering specifically, but something beyond the embezzlement? Too many unexplained deposits. Too many meetings with men he called investors. She paused. I'm selling the gallery. The abrupt change of subject caught Mark off guard. What? Fresh start. Portland has too many ghosts now. I've been offered a partnership in a gallery in Seattle. That sounds promising. It is. Her voice softened slightly. I wanted to thank you, Mark. Your approach to all this, it gave me a framework when everything was falling apart. We helped each other, Mark acknowledged, surprised by the genuine connection he felt with this woman he'd known for such a short time under such unusual circumstances. Yes, we did. Lila hesitated. One last piece of information you should have. Ashley came to see me yesterday. Mark's grip tightened on the phone. What? To beg me to intervene with you. To convince you to help her with the legal situation, Lila said. She seems to think I have some influence. And what did you tell her? Mark asked. That she made her choices and now must face their consequences. Just as Ethan must face his. The echo of Mark's own philosophy wasn't lost on him. Thank you for telling me. We strange allies should stick together, Lila's tone lightened. Goodbye, Mark Ellison. I hope you find peace. You as well, Lila Hayes. After the call ended, Mark sat, watching people move in and out of the police station, officers, civilians, each carrying their own complex stories. The twist in his own story had been unexpected, revealing layers of deception beyond what he'd imagined. Yet, strangely, it provided a kind of closure. The woman he'd married, the woman he'd thought he knew, had never really existed. The knowledge was oddly freeing, a confirmation that the path he'd chosen, the clean break he'd engineered, had been necessary. Mark started his car and drove away from the station, away from one more piece of the past. Ahead lay uncertainty, but also possibility. And for now, that was enough. 3 weeks after the revelation at Riviera, Portland settled into early summer. The rain gave way to sunshine, trees filled with fresh green leaves, and the city emerged from its perpetual dampness with renewed energy. Mark sat at an outdoor table at Riviera, now transformed from the scene of confrontation to neutral territory. Lydia Carver joined him, setting down 2 glasses of iced tea before taking the seat across from him. The patio looks good, Mark commented, gesturing to the newly installed deck with its hanging plants and string lights. Business picking up with the weather, better than expected, Lydia confirmed, studying him with friendly concern. You look well, better than the last time you were here. I feel better. Mark took a sip of his tea. Things are settling. I hear the divorce is almost final. Next week, Mark confirmed, faster than usual, but circumstances expedited things. Lydia nodded, understanding the understatement. Ashley's growing legal troubles and desire to finish the divorce before her potential criminal trial had removed many of the usual obstacles. The embezzlement investigation has expanded, with Ethan now facing serious federal charges and Ashley negotiating a plea deal as a cooperating witness. And work? Lydia asked. Still keeping you busy? Actually, I've taken a leave of absence. 3 months. Lydia's eyebrows rose in surprise. You? Voluntarily stepping away from work? Now that's a development I didn't expect. Mark smiled slightly. It surprised me too, but it seemed necessary. What will you do with all that free time? Travel? Some, Mark acknowledged, but I also wanted to discuss something with you. A proposition. Lydia leaned forward, intrigued. I'm listening. You mentioned expanding, opening a second location in the Pearl District. It's been the plan for years, but funding has been the challenge. Mark nodded. I'd like to propose a partnership. Investment capital in exchange for partial ownership. Silent partner? Primarily, though I might have some ideas to contribute on the business side. Lydia stared at him, clearly caught off guard. You want to invest in restaurants? That's unexpected. I want to invest in something tangible, Mark corrected. Something that builds community rather than just financial returns. Your restaurant does that. The restaurant business is risky, even in good times. I'm aware of the statistics. I've done my research. Of course, he had. Lydia shook her head with a small smile. Why this? Why now? Mark considered the question carefully. Recent events have clarified certain priorities. Work has always been my focus, but it's not enough. I need connection, purpose beyond code and software architecture. And you think you'll find that in the restaurant business? I think I'll find part of it there. Mark met her gaze directly. The rest, I'm still figuring out. Lydia sat back, really looking at the man across from her. In the years she'd known Mark Ellison, he'd always been controlled, precise, somewhat detached. The man before her now retained that essential composure but seemed more present somehow, more engaged with the world around him. Let me think about it, she finally said. Come by next week. We'll talk numbers and vision. Fair enough. As they finished their tea, Lydia asked the question Mark had been fielding from friends and colleagues for weeks. Are you okay, Mark? Really okay? For once, he didn't offer the automatic affirmation. I'm recalibrating, learning to trust my judgment again, despite having been so wrong about something so fundamental. You weren't wrong, Lydia countered. You trusted someone who proved untrustworthy. That's on her, not you. Mark nodded, accepting her perspective without fully embracing it. Either way, I'm moving forward. After leaving the cafe, Mark drove to the Pearl District, parking near the new location of Landon Gallery. Now under new management as Lila pursued her fresh start in Seattle, the space had been renamed and rebranded, its connection to the scandal deliberately severed. Yet on the back wall hung a familiar painting, the shattered mirror reflecting multiple distorted images, the one he and Lila had discussed during their first meeting. Mark stood before the painting, appreciating the symbolism with new insight. Beautiful piece, isn't it? Mark turned to find Will beside him. It is. The evening light stretched over the city, casting long shadows and transforming the familiar streets below. People hurried along, each person with a story, a destination. I stood there, watching it all unfold, my mind racing. Everything I once knew had been turned upside down, but somehow, the world around me continued. It was a strange feeling, watching life go on while I was stuck in a moment of transition. I couldn't help but think of Rachel. Her carefully built world was crumbling, piece by piece, and I wondered what she was feeling at that moment. Did she have any sense of the weight of what she had done? I didn't know, but I didn't feel satisfaction or anger. Instead, there was this quiet curiosity, a detached observation of her situation. She had become a part of my story, but not the whole story. I was the one writing the chapters now. As I looked out over the city, I thought about how much had changed in my own life. This wasn't the future I had imagined for myself. The life I'd spent years building had slipped away, And yet, I was still standing. The betrayal had shaken me, yes, but it hadn't broken me. In fact, it had forced me to face truths I had been avoiding for far too long. I was no longer the person I had been before. The person who thought he had all the answers. The person who had it all figured out. No, that person was gone. But in his place was someone different, someone who had learned that you don't need to have all the answers. That sometimes, the most important thing is to embrace uncertainty and take the next step forward, even when you don't know where it leads. I wasn't sure what my next chapter would look like, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was in control of the story. The truth is, change doesn't come easy. It's uncomfortable. It's messy. But sometimes, it's exactly what you need to grow. I could have let the betrayal define me. I could have let it consume me, let it shape the way I saw myself and the world around me. But I refused to let that happen. I refused to let one chapter, however painful, determine the entire book of my life. Instead, I focused on rebuilding. Not just my circumstances, but myself. There's something powerful about looking at the pieces of your life and realizing you have the power to put them back together in a new way. It's not about erasing the past. It's about accepting it, learning from it, and using it as the foundation for something stronger. The truth is, we all face moments where everything falls apart. Where the life we thought we were building disappears, and we're left standing in the rubble, wondering what comes next. But it's in those moments of uncertainty that we have the chance to discover who we really are. We don't rise from the ashes because we're forced to, we rise because we choose to. We choose to see the possibility in the pain, the opportunity in the struggle. So, I ask you, what do you do when life takes an unexpected turn? When everything you thought you knew falls apart? How do you rebuild from the rubble and find your way forward? We all have a story, and while the chapters might not always unfold as we expect, they are ours to write. I've learned that growth doesn't happen in comfort. It happens when we challenge ourselves, when we confront the hard truths, and when we choose to rise again. It's never too late to start fresh. It's never too late to begin a new chapter. The story of your life is waiting to be written, and you are the author. So I invite you to share your thoughts. What's your story? How have you navigated the tough moments in your own life? Let's take this journey together. Because the truth is, none of us are alone in our struggles. We are all in this together, learning, growing, and building new lives from the pieces we've been given.